Hi everyone, it's so good to see you today. I want to talk to you today about Ruth. If you've not read the Book of Ruth, it's very short, it's only 4 chapters. But what's great about the Book of Ruth is that there is such a love there. Now, Ruth was a Moabitess, and she was part of the tribe of Moab, which came from Lot. Lot had, through relations with his daughter, unbeknownst to him because he was drunk, he did not know that she had planned this, and she ended up having a son and called him Moab. Moab is a distant cousin of Israel. So just to give you that little bit of background. And Moab was considered an enemy of Israel because of children's sacrifice. They were involved in some different things, and it was not good at all. But a woman and her family moved out of Israel and moved to Moab due to a famine in the land of Israel during the time of Judges. So in this land, her and her husband went, and their 2 sons. And their 2 sons married Moabite women, one of which was named Ruth. Now, the woman who went to Moab, her name was Naomi. And Naomi ended up, and while she was there, her husband died. And then both of her sons also died. So she's a widow in a foreign land. She's not being looked well upon because she is a Hebrew. So it's a problem for her. But she hears how God has gone back into Israel. There's no famine, but there's now prosperity. There's blessing in the land. And her husband owned land in Israel. So she decides to go back. And she has 2 daughters, 2 daughter-in-laws, one named Ruth, one named Orpah. And the 2 daughter-in-laws like, oh, let us come with you, let us come with you, we love you, we love you. And she says, look, I won't have other sons that'll grow up and marry you. You'd be better off among your own people. And finally Orpah agrees, and she goes back, but Ruth stays with her. And it's a steadfast love. I mean, this is an honest love for this woman, that she loves her the way that she does. She's being loyal, she's being kind. She does everything she can to help Naomi, her mother-in-law, which was basically unheard of. But she just adored her so. And she goes, where you go, I will go. Your God will be my God. Your people be my people. She's like, I'm going with you, and nothing you say is going to deter me from that. So Naomi just says, all right, if you're coming, but I'm moving. And she picks up what she can carry with her, and she leaves, and Ruth follows behind her. When they get back to where they're from, where Naomi is from, the people see that she's back, and they're like, Naomi's back, Naomi's back. And they see this strange woman, because she would have been dressed as a Moabite. She wouldn't have been dressed as a Hebrew woman. And they see this strange woman with her, find out it's her daughter-in-law, like, well, she's got a Moabite for a daughter-in-law? Are you kidding me? So they kept a low profile. But they had to have food to eat. They couldn't go without eating. And their farm was not able to sustain them. It hadn't been worked in years. It was really just kind of falling apart. So Ruth decides she's going to go and glean in the fields. And she finds a field, and she starts working in this field. Now, gleaning means as they're going through the harvest, there are these people who are actually cutting down the wheat, they're cutting down the barley, they're cutting these different things down, and then once the gatherers have taken up what they usually take, there's things that fall to the ground. There's seed that's missed. It happens. So these, especially widows, would go behind, and they would pick up these things, trying to get enough food together so that they could make a meal, maybe more than one meal. But they made sure that they were in the field. So here's this woman Ruth. She goes, and this man shows up, and he happens to own this enormous field. And he finds out that she belongs to Naomi. She's the Moabite woman. And he looks at her, and he's just like, she's not like anything he's ever seen. And he gives her favor automatically. He automatically gives her favor. He tells his men, you drop extra seed for her. You make sure she has more. Don't, just make sure that when you shake some extra to the ground so that she can pick it up. And nobody's to touch her. Nobody's to approach her. No one is to say anything to her outside of kind words. Nobody's allowed to do that. Even when it was time to eat, she was allowed to come up to eat with everyone, which was not normally allowed. So she was allowed to eat, and then she saved some of the food that she'd gotten for her mother-in-law, besides the seed that she gathered up. Well, when she goes home and her mother-in-law goes, "Oh, you've had such a great day. Where did you glean from?" And she's like, "Gleaned out of this one field. His name was Boaz." And she said, "Boaz, he is a relative of ours. You need to go and stick with him and don't go to anybody else's field. You follow his men, you follow his women, you don't go anywhere else." So Ruth does that. She's faithful. She works very hard from morning to night, morning to night, morning to night. She doesn't complain. She doesn't do anything but go, and she's looking to provide. And Boaz sees this. Now Boaz isn't married and he doesn't have any children, and he's older than some of the other relatives in Ruth's family. And according to Jewish law, that if a man dies, his brother generally would marry the woman, and then if she had a baby, that they would raise that child up under the other brother's name, the first child that's born. But she didn't have anybody to do that. Boaz was considered a close relative. So when everything had finished with all of the different harvests that they had, Ruth's mother-in-law tells her to go to the threshing floor and to hide herself until after Boaz has basically drank himself happy and falls asleep. And she said, at that point, go and lay down at his feet. When he awakens, ask him to put his covering over you and take you as his wife. Well, that's pretty forward, okay? Because women didn't do that, and let alone to someone of his stature. I mean, he was very well known in the community. So she does what her mother-in-law tells her. She cleans herself up, puts on some perfume. She makes sure that she stays hidden until after everybody's gone, the threshing floor is empty, and Boaz has made himself happy because they had a great harvest. He drank until he couldn't drink anymore, and he passed out. So what does she do? She does exactly what her mother-in-law tells her to do. She goes and she uncovers his feet and lays at his feet. Well, he wakes up in the middle of the night, and it freaks him out because there's somebody laying at his feet. And he asks him, he says, "Who is this? What's going on?" And Ruth says who she is, and she says, "Please," she says, "I need you to redeem me." And he was so shocked and so surprised. And he said, "I would love to, but there is a kinsman that's closer than I am, and I have to speak with them first. I can't just redeem you, because to redeem Ruth would also mean to redeem all the property that went with Ruth, her husband, her brother-in-law, and her father-in-law. Whoever would marry Ruth would get all of that." And he says, "I need to talk to this other person first." He said, "But you could have had anybody." He says, "I'm older. Why would you pick me?" And again, here's this woman. She's being willing. She's being obedient. She's being full of love and compassion for her mother-in-law. He knows that she's a good woman. And she has turned away from her gods, and she chose the one true God. So he's just surprised. He's just so surprised by her action. So he said, "Okay." So he gives her a bunch of seed to take back, to take care of her and her mother-in-law. I mean, a bunch. And he goes, "You need to leave before it gets light out, because nobody should ever know that a woman came to the threshing floor. That's bad for everybody involved." He said, "Leave." So she left before it was even light out. And she gets back to her mother-in-law. She tells her mother-in-law, and she goes, "Don't you worry. He is not going to rest until the matter is settled." So the next morning, he's at the town gates, and he starts talking to people. He says, "I have a matter that needs to be discussed." And he says, "I need you guys to gather around." And then he finds the one relative that is closer than anybody else, and he says to them, "I need you to talk to me about this." He goes, "Ruth the Moabitess." He says, "They have land." And the other guy goes, I'm on it. I'll redeem it. I'll get the land. He goes, you need to wait a second. He goes, because whoever takes that land has to marry Ruth. And if they marry Ruth, that means you have to raise up a child in honor of her dead husband. And he's like, I really want the land, but I don't want her as a wife. So I'm going to pass. Now I'm paraphrasing. It's not exactly how he says it, but I'm paraphrasing. So he has to take his shoe off. And he takes his shoe off and gives it to Boaz and says, you redeem her. So he does. He redeems Ruth. Ruth ends up becoming the great-grandmother of King David. Here was an enemy of God that loved and understood enough and wanted to know the living God, that she forsook her family, she forsook her religion, she forsook everything to know the one true God, and God honored that and put her in the lineage of King David. That's remarkable. That's absolutely remarkable. You see, God will pick people that everybody else says, they're not worth my time. I don't want that in my life. Why do I want to open myself up to that? And there are some people that you should steer clear of. Don't get me wrong. But if these people are dedicated to God, and these people have left everything to serve the one true God, to love and to obey and to bless, then God will take care. God will bless. God will increase. Because he sees how valuable and how beautiful her heart is. So if you get a chance to read the Book of Ruth, I think you should do it. I think you should grab hold of it and do a study and find out more. Because God loves you. And you may have felt that you've been an enemy of God for a long time, but if you are looking to the living God and choosing him, he's going to bless you, and he's going to bless you in ways that everybody else says, no, I don't think I want to be a part of that. But God goes, no, I've got something better. And his ways are always better, and his goodness is always so good. Well, I do appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much. As always, go forth in Christ and prosper. We'll see you soon.